up with an exam plan as well. So that was actually very, very well done team. So it's entire Vigilant team, definitely board members and all committee members. Well done.
Thank you, Samir.
Great. Thanks.
Samir, no, Murray, I'll have to hold off on you. I got 3 other people ahead of you, and then we'll go back to you if you can.
Okay, thank you.
So Brian, I've got Steve and then Ingrid and Amber in my
Thank you.
notes. So Steve, if you want to go ahead.
Thanks, Sarah. I just wanted to comment, Brian. I want to thank staff very much for on the notes section of the chart for breaking everything down into actual. And it's so easy to follow along every category. And I just, from just an observer reading it, I just wanted to thank staff very much for making that change. It's very easy to follow.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Ingrid, you had a question?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Ingrid.
Got it. More a comment. I'm surprised at the amount of the investigation being over. I guess 21 investigations. I don't recall, is that much more than we've had in the previous years? I'm wondering if investigations cost has increased substantially in the last year.
I could speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Fazal.
So Ingrid, the big thing was the investigations for the insurance complaints. Those are really in-depth file reviews, and they're done by an additional company to the one we usually use. So those were the ones that piled on the heavy costs. Those are very expensive investigations, which is kind of new for us. Typically, our investigations are way smaller and simpler. So this is probably one of those anomaly years. We don't have a big intake of insurance complaints last year. So these are clearing out the ones that came in before.
Thank you.
Okay. And Amber, you had a question?
So I just was wondering, like, I think it's fantastic. Our budget kind of overall looks fantastic. And I noticed that there's a lot of under budget points that came up in relation to not having in-person meetings, because there's a lot of travel expenses that were saved this year. So I was just wondering what the college's kind of take on that is moving forward. Once COVID is a thing of the past, are we going to look at doing more online meetings like we're doing now to try to continue to have some of that cost savings? Or are we going to be looking at kind of scrapping that all together and only doing in-person meetings like we were doing before?
Fazal, go ahead.
So Amber, I think that's a great question, because I think it's the remote meetings have got their benefit. I think in person has got their benefits. So I think this is going to be something the board will have to kind of to discuss how they want to move forward in the sort of the new future. I do see sort of I don't think it'll be an open and shut situation. I think as the pandemic hopefully eases and the restrictions ease up, I still think that we're going to have a phased re-entry into the office where we'll probably have some caps on the number of people in the boardroom and in the staff area. So I think it's kind of a dynamic thing. We have budgeted this year for maybe the last quarter or so, half to quarter of the Q3 and Q4's meetings possibly starting to come back online in person. I know a few board members have expressed that travel definitely eats up their own personal time, and definitely there's a cost to the college. So I think the board will, all of you can discuss it. We'll execute whatever your wishes on the admin end. We're going to also have a phased approach and consider work from home as a like maybe a hybrid version or something like that, because everyone's getting their job done well here at the admin end. So if we can save people coming in, great. But if the board wants to have a committee meeting in person or a board meeting in person, there'll definitely be the appropriate staff to do that. So perhaps in one of our strategic meetings, we can talk about what the new world looks like, and you can give us direction.
That's great. Thank you. Were there any other questions, comments, feedback on the financials? Murray?
I do have one, yes. It's more a comment, and I'm wondering if it would be possible going forward to get a bottom line, like the expenses or the revenue less the expenses overall, to see how we're doing vis-a-vis the budget in aggregate.
Definitely. So Marie, that's actually in the briefing note here where you'll see the surplus for the
Yes.
year. So we were 610.
Yeah. No, I did see that, but I was just wondering if we could include it on the statement.
For sure. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Murray. And Peggy, I see your hand as well. Do you want to go ahead?
If I recall properly, you gave a break to the opticians by decreasing their annual fees. So I'm wondering how in the end that revenue item came in over budget. Basically my question.
Peggy, which line were you looking at?
Near the top. Big revenue item.
Line 2, the total revenue?
Well, line 3 really.
Line 3?
The budget's 2.98. It came in at 3. I would have expected it to come in lower if you decreased the annual rate. I'm just curious as to what went on there.
So this is the 2020 numbers. So the 2021 numbers are going to reflect the decrease in revenue.
It's a timing issue of when they have to pay their fees.
Well, the thing is, this budget, like the fees are always paid in advance of the year. So the fee reduction that we gave wasn't for the past year; it was for this coming year, for 2021. Okay. So our revenue for this year has been impacted. Okay. We had collected 2020's revenue in December 2029, pretty much all of it. And there, and that fee was not changed. So we came in pretty much on budget there. It's going to be 2021's fees that we reduced by 25%.
The registration is a January to January calendar year registration for all ROs?
It's January to January as far as effectiveness, but it's collected between November and December of the previous year. So we collect our fees in advance.
In terms of budget, you put it into the next year's budget, even though you've received it in the previous calendar year.
Yep.
Okay. Being a public member, I didn't know the timing.
Yeah, the timing, because we collected, it's, I forget, Fizz, I don't know if you know the fancy term for like a advanced revenues, deferred income, I guess.
Yeah. Deferred revenue.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's been a real strength for us to be able to stably budget, because we have our funds in advance for the year. So we're fortunate for that.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, final thoughts before we move to a motion on the financials? Okay. Not seeing any. So Brian, I'm going to pass that to you then to take us to a motion.
Thanks, Sarah. So at this particular time, I'm going to call for a motion to approve the financial report as presented.
Omar.
I heard a voice.
Omar.
I think it was Omar.
Omar. Okay, that's number 2. I need a seconder. Amber is number 2. Is the seconder. All in favor? Hands up. Passed. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. So we're going to move on now to the terms of reference for the registration committee, and we're going to have Diana Bristow, the governance chair, present for us.
Good morning, everyone, and nice to see you all this morning. We, the governance committee, is pleased to present 3 amended and 1 new terms of reference for your consideration. We have completed the process of updating and refreshing these terms of reference for all of the college's committees. These policies set the terms and the parameters around each college committee and how they operate. 3 of the policies before you have been updated to make sure that they're still relevant to the work that the committees do and reflect any changes or additions that need to be made to make sure the terms are reflective of that work. The clinical practice committee terms of reference is brand new, and the updates are before you. Hopefully you've had a chance to read them. We'll start with the fitness to practice terms of reference policy 4-14, and I'll hand it back to Sarah to open the floor.
You're on mute, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm going to start by asking if there's any general comments or questions from the board. Okay, not seeing any. So this is going to be our first use of the question that Amy referenced a little bit earlier. So I am going to ask the board what the board considers to be the public interest rationale for this decision. Does someone want to provide some thoughts on that?
This is Murray. I would think that given these policies and the policy amendments, it should increase the public's trust in the board's ability to guide the college in their governance.
Okay, thanks, Murray. Anyone want to add anything on this piece?
It's Diana. So
Yes.
the terms of the registration committee terms of reference were created May 4th, 2012 and had not been revised since. So I think it's timely as part of the board's commitment to update terms of reference.
Okay, great. Okay, any other last comments or thoughts on this one? I see Ingrid has a question.
More just a comment that I think by adding 3 individuals who are not registrants of the college, that's public members who may have been appointed to sit on committees, opens the committee, all the committees, to more public input.
Okay, great. So some additional rationale there. Samir?
Yeah, actually Ingrid covered the point that I was going to discuss, but anyway, it's the same thing, that I welcome the idea of having non-optician appointed member included into the committee. A board decide and a bylaw permits. From the DEI and public interest standpoint, it gives more clarity in a process that we do at a college. So definitely very welcome ideas for sure.
Okay. Omar?
My take or insight in all of the regulatory process, what we are currently discussing, leads me to the point where I think most people who come forward with a problem regarding a health provider have a common objective. Everyone has a common objective. And that objective, in my view, is to ensure that the problem does not happen again to someone else. This is my view on the overall processing of what we're discussing.
Okay, thank you, Omar. Okay. So if there's no further comments or questions, maybe I'll do for a test of 5 to see folks' comfort moving forward. Show of hands, again, a 4 or 5 means that you feel comfortable moving forward with a motion. I see everyone's hands up for the screens. That looks like everyone. Okay, so I'm going to pass to Brian now for a motion.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to call for a motion, therefore, then, to approve the Registrations Committee Terms of Reference Policy 4-13 as recommended by the Governance Committee. I need a mover.
So moved.
That's Ingrid. I see Ingrid. Seconder?
Steve.
Mike?
Steve. Sorry, Mike. You next time. All in favor? Hands up. It's fast, unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, so Diana, you can take it away with the next section on the fitness to practice terms of reference.
Thank you, Sarah. So same background and basically the same discussion. I don't think there's much more background on this. Again, we're just updating the terms of reference for your consideration. Fitness to practice policy 4-14. Sorry, Brian, I said that one earlier, but we're working on the fitness to practice at this time. So basically the same discussion. And just to pick up on the comments from everyone else, I think that adding these new potential members also provides an opportunity for some additional diversity in the committees.
Good. Okay, thanks, Diana. So let's open the floor to any additional questions on this one. And then again, thinking about that question around the rationale for the public interest. So I see Samir and then Steve. Go ahead, Samir.
Actually, I was going to make a motion in that, but I'll wait for the comment. Comments already been done for the previous one.
Steve, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I just wanted to say that it shows the public that 9 years have gone by and that we're a very proactive college in that we're updating records from 9 years ago and bringing them up into 2021, 9 years later, the most up-to-date information that's available. And I think that shows a very, very progressive college and board.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Other thoughts or comments for this one on the public interest rationale? Okay, not seeing any. Let's do a test to move forward on this one. So fist of 5, again, in terms of feeling comfortable moving forward with a motion on this piece. Seeing all hands up, that's great. So Brian, I'll pass to you for a motion.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to call for a motion, and I'm going to suggest that Samir, you're going to move it because you were anxious to do it to begin with. The motion reads to approve the fitness to practice committee terms of reference policy 4-14 as recommended by the governance committee. Samir, you've already motioned that you're anxious to do that one, and I think Mike, I missed you the last time, so can I suggest, Mike, you second that next one?
I will.
Add it. Thank you very much. All in favor, hands up. Passed, unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so Diana, will pass back to you for the quality assurance terms of reference.
Yeah, so I would like to put before you policy 4-15 to update the quality assurance committee terms of reference for your consideration. And does anyone have any questions?
Okay, so we'll open the floor to questions. Questions, feedback. Okay. Are there additional comments that folks want to raise in terms of the public interest rationale for this decision? Okay, if there's no other additional ones, do folks want to confirm that some of the rationale that has been discussed for the previous policies applies to this one? Can I get just some confirmation there that those same issues already raised by folks apply to this one?
I think, Sarah, you're getting a
pick on
thumbs up
someone.
from your chair.
I'm seeing some hands raising from Ingrid and others. Okay, super. So it looks like there's no additional feedback or comments on this piece. Do a quick high five in terms of comfort moving forward. Fingers and hands, looks like everyone feels good. So Brian, we will move to you.
Thanks again, Sarah. So this motion is going to be read as such: to approve the Quality Assurance Committee terms of reference policy 4-14 as recommended by the Governance Committee. Can I have a mover?
Henry, so moved.
Henry moves. And need a seconder?
Amber.
Amber seconds it. All in favor, hands up. Unanimous pass. Thank you.
Okay, super. So back to Diana now with the last piece on the clinical practice terms of reference.
So as mentioned, the clinical practice terms of reference policy 4-16 is new. So while it's similar, I don't know if there's any discussion around the fact that it's new or if there's questions. So I'll just open the floor up for questions and back to you, Sarah.
Okay, questions on this one from folks or feedback and comments? Okay, Not seeing any additional questions.
Yeah.
Suppose, oh, yeah.
Fazal.
If I can make one comment, I just wanted to thank the group for creating terms of reference for this group. This is a relatively new committee. It was an ad hoc in previous years. And having a formal clinical practice committee, I think, is going to help us with our strategic plan, specifically goal 1 about making sure that we regulate, and dispense eyewear in light of changing technology and practice environment changes. So having this committee will keep an eye on that all the time. So I think it supports the strategic plan of the college. So I think it's a good move.
Thank you, Fazal. Any other comments or feedback? Yeah, Ingrid?
I think it also aligns us with other regulated colleges because everyone has a clinical practice and we haven't, as a standing committee.
Okay, so alignment with other colleges. Okay, any other comments or feedback? Steve?
Yeah, again, it just shows that we are being very progressive and rather than reactionary.
Okay. And Mike, something to add?
Yes, I was wondering, is the 9 years typical, or when are we planning on to revisit these again? Like, is 9 years sort of typical when we revise all of these, or is it just because we had the new team doing it?
Actually, I'm going to check with Amy as far as, I think that we've got them now in a table as far as a review schedule. Amy, could you maybe comment on that?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Fazal. And it's a good question, Mike. Part of the process of updating these terms of reference was to actually move them into the governance manual. Previously, they were sort of standalone and floating, and we wanted to make sure that we captured them in a place where they would be subject to regular review. So every policy in the governance manual has a review schedule, and it'll come up for regular review before the committee and the board. Typically, it's about 3 years.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions from folks? We heard some additional public interest rationale for this one. Any other ones that folks would like to add or comments? Okay. Not seeing any. We'll do again the fist of 5 to make sure that we feel comfortable moving forward with a motion. If I can see everyone's hands. That looks great. Okay, Brian, I will pass to you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I just wanted to comment that the governance committee last year, Steve and Diana, even by looking at this agenda, you guys have done an awful lot of work. So I congratulate you on the past year and this year sort of thing. I know Steve is wiping his eyebrow that he doesn't have to present as much this year, but Diana's doing a great job. The motion will read: to approve that the Clinical Practice Committee Terms of Reference Policy 4-16 as recommended by the Governance Committee. Can I have a mover?
It's Murray. I'll
Netta,
move.
I heard Netta and Murray, seconder, all in favor. Unanimous passed. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Diana, for the presentation. So we're going to move now to the monitoring reports, and we're going to invite Fazal Khan, the Registrar and CEO, who will present on these items. Go ahead, Fazal.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm just going to get my own notes up here. Okay, so the first one is the strategic plan monitoring report. This is a very short window. It's actually from when you last saw it to the end of the year. So there's not a lot that's changed on the strategic plan. So Shelby, if I can get you to scroll down a teeny bit to the report itself, just a little bit further. Yeah, so the monitoring report's in front of you, and you have seen it already a couple of times during the year. So I'm just going to point out a couple of the things that are updated as of the year end. So 1.2, if you can scroll up a little bit more, or scroll down, sorry, Shelby, to maybe the second page. Yeah, so 1.2, Some of the things that have been updated, the number of hours new professional CE number of hours taken as far as the new CE that we've developed. So the aim was for 2. We've got 3 there in modules that we've created. And then we've got 3.5 as far as presentations that we've made. The next one, the number of hours of new CE that was developed and undertaken by opticians, we had set a target of 1,500 hours. So you'll see the different modules that we have. Return to practice guidelines had about 750 hours, or 750 people take those. It was a 1-hour module when we were coming out of the first lockdown. So that was one of our records for attendance, and it was our first time that we've done our own presentation. Usually we do it through a CE provider. The Chapter 3, jurisprudence, the communications chapter had about 1,800 opticians take that. The RHPA one had about 1,100, so yeah, almost 1,200 there. And then our fall presentations showing 161 there. So we're seeing a lot of hours being used by our registrants. So I think that's a really encouraging aspect. I think it also helps promote any regulatory messages and updates that we're getting out there. So I think this is a good sign, and we're definitely ahead of our targets. If we can scroll again to 1.3, we had initially targeted 3 environmental scans at least for the year. We had about 7 done. There was definitely a lot of production happening at the college this year. We didn't really slow down. And so the team had ended up doing about 7 enviro scans, bringing information to the various committees and boards. And then Shelby, if we can go to 3.1. So 3.1, in these boxes here, Carolyn has updated sort of our social media figures, social media impressions, things like that. She will be giving a report on it later today as far as our communications report, but the chart's been filled out. We again have met or exceeded our targets. I think this year was a bit of an anomaly in the sense that because of the pandemic, there was such a hunger for information that we had a lot of people end up joining us. So some good things have come out of the pandemic for us. We've definitely increased our followership on the different platforms. And we're also being very, very particular about how we're communicating. We're not trying to bombard everybody with email communications. And so things that are sort of a lower tier as far as emergence or emergency level are going out in our social media channels, and we're updating our message or putting out various messages frequently on the social media channels to keep them sort of relevant and engaged. So I think our strategy is working there. 3.2, again, these are updated statistics that Carolyn has put here as far as views to our website. And we're getting a lot of traction again in the light of the pandemic. I think registrants and the public are engaging our website. And then, it says, let's see here, complaints. One of the things that Harry Caton had said when we had heard from him, the consultant on regulatory reform, the sign of a good regulator, which we're usually quite silent and in the background, but the sign of a good regulator engaging with the public is the fact that the public knows that there's a regulator for a certain profession, and they often usually look for us when there is something amiss. And so an increase in complaints is typically an indicator that you're getting traction with stakeholders. So we did have a small increase in complaints there. So as much as it doesn't seem like a good thing, it is a good thing. So I think we're going in the right direction. 3.4. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Shelby. So this is also going in the right direction. We're seeing compliance figures going up with the quality assurance program. I think this is a combination of engaging with them frequently and also making the quality assurance portal. We had soft launched it in 2019, 2020. There was a requirement that you had to upload. So I think with it being easier because of the paperless format. I think more people are recording their quality assurance and keeping on top of it. I think also there's an awareness that these requirements are annual, and not to rely on the fact that you were audited once and you probably have a couple of years before you're audited again. So I think there's some more diligence being undertaken by our registrants to keep up to date with their QA. The other thing is also we've in the last year or so undertaken a lot more production of continuing education, free continuing education, the professional growth category. We've given more than their requirements, so we've created accessibility to extra content. So I think that's assisting our registrants. 3.5. We set a target of about 11% response rate. You'll see in the column that responses fluctuate depending on how exciting the content is, I guess. So sometimes our bylaws are not entirely gripping and could have a low response of 1.6. The return to practice guidelines were a big one because they were affecting everybody during the pandemic. So that had a high of 22.8. So we'll keep that in mind when we factor in targets for next year. So those are basically the updates to this document that you had seen recently, but the team had a chance to fill in at year end some of the missing numbers. So I was just wondering at this junction, does anybody have any questions about that report?
Great. So we'll open the floor to questions. And I think for the purposes of the next sort of number of reports that we look at, we're really looking at hearing some feedback or comments on whether you agree with the interpretation of this strategic outcomes policy report, and then any feedback or comments on the steps taken. So feedback or comments on the interpretation. I see Steve.
Thanks, Sarah. I think this, I'm in total agreement with it. I think it's very well interpreted, and what was achieved was what we had set out and goals that were expectations that have been met. And I'm particularly happy with the public's, whether it be the registrants or even the public's interest, looking at surveys and their responses back. And it shows like even the negative side of it, where people will make complaints. Nothing is perfect. I've always thought, and my philosophy of working is, if you don't get if there's no complaints, no one's doing their job. So there's always going to be some complaints coming in, and the public knows that it's out there. And I think overall, I'm really impressed by it. It's good. Very good job.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. So I see Ingrid and then Netta.
I echo that. I have a question though.
Sure.
The not yet applicable, I see mostly is because the data hasn't been collected, but in one spot, 1.2, where the hours, total CE hours have been exceeded, and we've got, why is there an NA in that box? I'm not.
Thank you, Ingrid. That actually should be a checkbox.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, that's just a miss on our part, just on the checkbox, but yeah, thank you.
Okay, super. Netta.
Yes, thank you. Fazal, quick question. Our social media, it's all done in-house?
It's a combination of going through the communications office, which is Carolyn, and then working with two consultants. We have one doing sort of search engine optimization for us, and then we have a content person who's helping us with art and posting. So some of the images and things that you've seen on our Instagram, it's a third party that we're using to get us those. So we're developing content in-house so that the message is correct, but we're using somebody with a good creative eye to get us the images and the positioning and things. So it's a team approach.
Perfect. And just want to make sure that all the followers, all that, it's done organically.
I would have to find out, but basically, like the search engine optimization, we're definitely, aiming for sort of organic hits and positioning. As far as our social media followers, these are all people who aren't basically paid or influencers or anything like that. So these are all authentic followers.
Perfect. Can I point out anything about QA at this point for the strategic planning, or anywhere else we're going to talk about QA?
Netta, so is that as far as, like, I do have lower in the document sort of our targets for the next, like the coming year, 2021. I don't know if that's what you were looking at, or just in general, do you have any concerns about QA?
In general. If I don't know, is this the place I can bring it up, or it's somewhere else that we're gonna, we have a chance to talk about like general, then I can bring the QA question that I have.
Yeah, I think like typically what we would do is an issue assessment. So if you would start with sort of raising it with a QA chair, and then it'll go to the committee and we can get the information for it and then bring it to the board with an issue assessment.
Perfect. Thank you, Fazal.
Great. Thanks.
Great report. Thank you.
Great. So a couple people had their hands up, but it looks like Murray's the last one standing. So Murray, go ahead.
It's more a comment. I echo all the positive comments on the report, and but I do have one question on 3.2, where our objective for page views was 150, and we came in at 21,400. Is that, are we measuring the same thing?
Yeah, you know what, Murray, when we set these all up last year, they were all shots in the dark. As far as, we don't have a ton of traction. We don't have a big group of public people following us. So it was most of these targets, they were all educated guesses, but we were really in the dark as far as public followers. So we just set a very modest target. And what you'll see further down in the report is sort of rejigged targets. But yeah, that one was just sort of throwing a dart at a dartboard and seeing where it stood.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing one last question from Henry, and then if maybe we'll make that the last one in the interest of time. Go ahead, Henry.
Yeah, Fazal, just a question with the complaints. We've got it for the 2 years. What's the norm for that? Like over, let's say, the last 10 years, the number of complaints that come in? And then the second follow-up question would be, what happens to them?
Okay, so as far as getting you historical, I'd have to ask the department to get me those numbers. I don't think we've seen any massive shift. Typically, maybe 12, 13 complaints in an average year, and nothing crazy. And then as far as what happens to them, that's a definitely an intricate question. I'm going to see if Amy might be able to give a super condensed overview of that.
Sure thing. So the short answer is that all complaints must be investigated and disposed of in some way by the Inquiries, Complaints, and Reports Committee, and where appropriate, they would be referred on to the Discipline Committee. So you get quarterly reports from both of those committees on the matters that they have considered and the statistics coming out of those two groups. So there is both the quarterly report and the ICRC's annual report in your package today, where you can find some more information on what those outcomes were and how they distributed. But every complaint does have to get investigated. That's part of our mandate as the college.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, so I didn't hear any concerns from folks in terms of the interpretation. Do a quick fist of 5 to confirm that people feel okay moving forward with a motion on this report. Dorina, yeah, okay. Yeah, that looks like everyone. Okay, Brian, I'm going to pass to you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. So this particular motion is read as such that the board approve the registrar's interpretation of the policy as a reasonable interpretation. I'd like a mover. That's Mike. Seconder.
Steve.
Henry.
Steve. Henry, you'll be next after next one. All in favor, hands up. Passed. Unanimous. Thank you. So we're going to do the second motion then, I guess, right now on my agenda.
Yep.
Motion 2 is going to read that the board agrees that the registrar CEO complied with the policy. I need a mover. I'll go Henry. You got the first one. I need a seconder. Murray, seconder. All in favor, hands up. Passed. Thank you.
Okay, so we move back to Fazal with the financial planning and budgeting monitoring report.
Okay, so the next item. Now, again, what's in front of you, this is kind of a new thing for us in the last year. So what you have here is the financial planning and budgeting monitoring report. So this report, the last report was sort of tying up the last year. This is showing sort of the whole year. It covers from January to December of last year. And the policy has certain policy requirements that are in the the left-hand column, that there's a multi-year strategic plan in place, that reasonable funds are assigned. So I'll just quickly do some high-level overview of what we felt the interpretation was, and then the evidence to back that up. So multi-year strategic plan, that's what the board requires. So our interpretation is that we have a multi-year strategic plan, which you just saw, that we developed budgeting for it and making sure that we have allocated enough funds to these strategic initiatives. So as you can see from before, we have a strategic plan. Budgeting has been accurate for the most part. Reasonable fund assignment. We have, been budgeting enough funds for things like meetings, communications, all of that. So again, while we ran short on some funds as far as exam revenue, the good thing was that it was offset more than well with the fact that we went to remote meetings. So again, budget-wise, we're in good shape. We're actually trending to a surplus for 2020. We'll know better once we audit those numbers. Funds assigned for board use. Again, we had allocated 220,000. We came in significantly less because of the fact that we were in a remote situation, so we didn't run short. As far as regular analysis goes, the interpretation we have in-house is that we're doing regular analysis of our strengths and weaknesses, our opportunities. So we are doing constantly environmental scanning, especially things that impact the budget. So early on, we were cognizant that we would have an impact from exams. We do enlist our CA, or accounting firm, Graywell Goyette, to take a peek at our books and also bounce off sort of our calculations or extrapolations, so that we're using sort of accounting advice to do these type of things. The big one being that we were trying to analyze what fees were looking like in the next couple of years, as the board wanted to talk about possibly freezing or reducing fees at some point. Definitely the pandemic has thrown a wrench in things, and the fact that we've had to dig into the coffers to allow a fee reduction is going to impact that. And we'll talk about the fees at the May board meeting as we set the table for the next few years. Financial projections, again, we're using accounting principles, and we're looking at demographic planning, such as the amount of people coming into the profession, including going all the way back to how many people the schools are graduating, and then comparing it to the people that are leaving the profession due to attrition. The pandemic, for instance, has accelerated some people's retirement. On our renewal, some people said that they indicated choosing not to renew and cited the pandemic as being that cause. They were probably due to retire in a couple of years, and they've kind of called it a day earlier. So these are all things that we take into account when we're trying to project revenues for the next couple of years. Reserve fund expenditure, So the big thing in this policy is that we didn't spend more than what the reserves have on hand. And so again, we were able to keep on budget. The reserve funds, if anything, we looked at the general reserve and we budgeted that we had money sitting there, and we were able to extend the registrants' lowering of their dues for 2021. So again, we'll balance the books using the reserve fund there. Sound financial planning. Again, we look at historical numbers, but we also try to look at what's happening in the current space to make sure that we're looking at all factors and budgeting accordingly. And then as far as budget development goes, the board had seen at the December board meeting the draft budget, what the rationale was for the numbers that we had come up with, and approved that budget. So it's in place, and we will be giving you quarterly reports going forward on the 2021 budget, but you were given regular reports. The Finance Committee was given regular reports. And as you can see, the budgeting we did for 2020 was quite accurate. So essentially in front of you, there are two questions. I'll switch it back to Brian as far as what we're looking for. Actually, Sarah, I guess I'll get you to check and see if there's any questions, and then.
Yeah, any questions? And again, we'll try to keep it for the interest of the conversation to the interpretation of the report. I see Henry's hand and then Steve.
Excellent report. I think from a public point of view, it's very, it's detailed. It's got everything that you need to know. It's transparent. And I commend you, Sal. Excellent job.
Thank you, Henry.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, I echo Henry's comments, and I just wanted to point out that the investment fees, if I'm correct, that she showed that they were up 30%, I think, on our investments over a year ago, if that's correct. And I think that's fantastic. So keep going on whatever that money's invested in. Keep doing what you're doing. Excellent job. And I like the way, not only to the registrants and to the public at large, in that when we come up with the reduction for the membership at large, and that was brought to executive and then passed by this board, that the safeguard in it was that you went to the auditors and got their advice. That is amazing. Rather than just going out on your own and like, okay, and just pulling something out of a hat and saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You're always safe checking other people's money, and that is so important. And I as a board member, I appreciate that so much, and I believe that the membership does too, and certainly the public. Well done.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Steve. Mike.
I just wanted to echo what a great report it is too, Fazell, and Steve just stole my thunder on going to the accounting firm for understanding and how the impact of the fees were. So again, a great job.
Thank you, Mike.
So largely positive feedback. Let's do a quick test before we move forward with a motion. Show of hands in terms of moving forward on a motion. Okay, so Brian, I will pass to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Just before I ask for that motion, I just want to acknowledge Peggy Dreyer as one of the staff members that has joined us. I'm sorry, Peggy, I either missed you or you came in late. I'm not sure, but I'm sure I'll hear about it later. Anyways, the motion is going to read, the board approve the registrar's interpretation of the policy as a reasonable interpretation. That's motion number one. So I need a mover.
I move it.
That's Mikey, move it. Seconder.
Amber.
Amber seconds it. All in favor, hands up. Passed unanimous. Thank you. Second motion will read that the board agrees that the registrar CEO complied with the policy. I need a mover. Netta is number one. Number two. I'm going to pick somebody. Elsa. I'm picking Elsa this time.
Yes.
All in favor, hands up. Passed. Thank you.
Okay, so Fazal, I'll take it back to you for the corporate identity, public image, and communication monitoring report.
Okay, great. I'm going to, in the interest of time, keep motoring on that.
Yeah.
So I think this is the first time the board is seeing this report. So again, it covers all of 2020. And so the policy requirements again are on the left, the interpretation and evidence is on the right. This one's pretty easy report. Name of the organization, corporate identity and seal, nothing has changed there. So that's an easy one. External use of corporate identity. One thing that I wanted to point out was the college is pretty vigilant on making sure that third parties aren't using our name or logo in a way that comes across as looking like we are partnered or endorsing any event. So CE events, things like that, we're very vigilant on it. We actually haven't had any issues in the last year or two, I would say. So I think this is good. When we do share anything as far as our presentations with our branding on it, they are in PDF format so that they can't be altered. So we're quite particular there. Use of corporate seal. As per the bylaws, we've got our signing officers that are updated every year as far as the executive committee goes. And all the contracts are managed through our what we call our executive office here at the in the office, which is the registrar and the deputy registrar. Internal and external corporate communications and public relations. Carolyn acts as our manager of communications to oversee that all our communications going out are sort of framed with the right audience in mind, and they have the similar look and feel to all our communications. Netta, to your point, we do work with a social media consultant to manage our presence on our different platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Senior staff, myself, Amy, for instance, we do look over all the text before it's given to the social media firm for deployment. And there's some examples of all the different things that we've done. So essentially, that is a very simple report, but it is in front of you there. I'm open for questions.
Great. Okay, so again, any thoughts on the interpretation? Comments or feedback on this one? See Mike?
Well, again, I think it's clear and decisive that the report shows that the following of us on the internet, the increase gives us all of the awareness that that's happening, and it's again, well done.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Any other comments or feedback before we move for a motion on this one? Okay, so we'll do another show of hands and comfort moving forward based on the interpretation and the steps taken. Okay, I'm seeing comfort moving forward. So Brian, I will pass that to you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. So the motion will read that the board agrees that the registrar CEO complied with the policy. The mover?
So moved.
I saw Mike and I heard Henry. All in favor? Passed.
Okay, so we'll pass back for the last piece on the emergency registrar CEO succession plan monitoring report.
Perfect. Okay, so this has been in front of the board once already before, and it's been updated to reflect the coming year. So this will cover January 2020 to 21. So essentially, and it's in place as we speak. So the big level on the policy ensuring that one or more senior staff are familiar with the board and the registrar processes and are able to assume the position of the registrar until an interim successor or permanent registrar is hired. So the one big thing that we've done is we created sort of an executive office at the admin level, which was not only myself, but also the deputy registrar. And up until Melanie's mat leave, we included Amy as sort of a third sort of emergency measure. This has come in really good as Melanie is on her maternity leave and as our deputy registrar, and Amy has stepped up into the role of acting deputy registrar as well as our legal in-house counsel. So the nice thing is Amy was able to hit the ground running. and things, the other parts of the deputy registrar role, such as the HR component and things, have actually been given off to Fiza Assad, who is our HR and finance specialist in the office. So all of these roles transition smoothly. Suffice to say, you've got a good person on staff in Amy as acting deputy registrar to take over for any short or medium or long term if anything were to happen. Amy has been brought in the last little while into different arenas. She has been engaging with our external stakeholders. Amy was a critical presenter in the return to practice guidelines. So actually some of the registrants have come to see Amy now at the presentation level. Amy has been attending the national meetings. She's also attended the advisory committee meetings as well. So she's engaged with school, she's engaged with the national regulators. She's been part of the HPRO, the federation here in Ontario of all the regulators. She's been an active member of those meetings. So Amy is well up to speed. Number two, as far as keeping the board chair informed, I can't say a week doesn't go by where Brian and I don't touch base. Sometimes a couple of times.
Almost daily.
Yeah. So I try to make sure that the board chair is informed. And then in degrees of complexity, the executive and also the entire board will get updates, whether it's FYIs of interesting articles or copies of any circulations that we make to the entire board. Number three, maintaining COO records in an organized and accessible fashion. 2019, we'd already reported on that we had engaged somebody to create a file retention policy. In 2020, our files were actually migrated over to a new cloud-based server with multiple layers of backup and security so that we are not easily victim to any ransomware or anything like that. We also updated the virtual boardroom that houses the information that you see. So that's gone and undergone a refresh. We did a security audit as well in 2019, and in 2020 we were implementing a lot of the findings. So everyone at the college has got their own dedicated email address. Things are not going to personal or shared addresses. The other thing we also got away from is accepting credit cards, credit card numbers. We're not storing those. We're not accepting those. We've tipped to our in-house project manager, IT support. And actually Peggy Dreyer was one of the drivers here, where we've created processes in-house to online collect fees for late fees and things like that without having to take people's credit card information. And then just recently, we deployed the multi-factor authentication MFA, which some people or many of you have undertaken some lessons. So this is another updated version of security, or another layer of security. And that was basically implemented at the end of last year and into this year. So that is the policy. Those are our interpretations and evidence.
Questions or comments on the interpretation for this piece? See Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Sarah. Fazal, how far down the food chain do we have to go? For example, now with your deputy being out on maternity, if something ever happened to you, say you broke all your toes on your feet walking upstairs or something.
We just picked something like I was on vacation and couldn't get back home.
Exactly. How far below your position do you have to go to get successions in order? Is there a chart you go by or something?
So we have an org chart. It's relatively flat. You know, we have the executive office tier, we have managers, and we have coordinators. So right along the one tier with me, just below me is the deputy registrar and legal counsel. Right now, Amy's doing double duty, wearing those two hats together. And if she had to sort of take over and put all her focus on my duties, then she has full authority to sub out the legal work. We have a lot of lawyers, good lawyers that we work with. So we can get external, like we used to do in the old day, get external legal counsel advice for legal work. And Amy could right away turn the switch on the next morning and be taking this seat easily.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike?
Again, just the fact that we've already seen this report and just to know that Fazal and his team have a finger on the pulse just with all the changes and updates from the original report. So again, oodles to the staff and yourself.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks. Samir and then Omar. Oh, and Samir, did
sorry.
you still have a comment?
Yeah. So Fazal, that's definitely great. And I know as an organization, everyone, or we should have a backup plan. Definitely, I don't doubt any capability of Amy at all. It's been great. Even sometime is my point of contact as well sometime if I have a question. So definitely, yes. And then as you explained it, if Amy were to take over your role, I am kind of more satisfied that we have someone external legal that we can get help from and get our seat rolling for sure. That's great. Thank you, Fazal.
Absolutely. Thank you, Samir.
Okay, and then Omar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for accommodating my hands up. My questions or point that I intend to make is not perhaps specifically related to the subject matter before us, but I hope it is within the parameters of the subject matter. And please, I appreciate your facilitation. Previously, many past meetings, board meetings, and even recently in today's agenda, the council has been making presentations and making motions whereby the CEO or the registrar should comply with the motions and policies, etc. My question is, and perhaps this was done past before, but just to help to refresh my memory, is our CEO always in a position to make a frank and open discussions, to have a frank open discussions about problems, about challenges and alternatives? Does he have that range, whereby there is no restrictions surrounding his thoughts, his thought process, his frankness, his openness?
So I could touch on that a little bit, Omar. I would say a lot of the agility that the administration has demonstrated over this year comes from the trust and latitude that you give us when you set the strategic direction and allow us to do the rowing and get the job done. And so I feel very empowered, and I like to empower my staff to fulfill what we need to be innovative and on track. But that really does come at a higher level. I have seen situations where there are CEOs and registrars who are trying to be innovative and moving the needle forward as far as governance reform and aren't met with the support. We have passed so many governance reforms in the last several years, and that has been things that we brought from the administration forward, but the board has been very embracing of all these things. So I do feel very comfortable with the board of this organization, that I am able to speak frankly. I have got good relationships with most all of you, and so if there's something on a committee level, I've spoken to chairs. On the board level, I expressed that through Brian, and overall, I love to come into the office and get things done, and it's because I feel that I've been empowered by this board. So I appreciate the support that I'm given, and I feel confident that I can speak frankly.
Omar, does that address your question with respect to?
It does, to be honest here, because the more clarity we get in our understanding, it's just helped to enhance, the overall performance of everyone, and that at no time, anyone should feel fear or have any hesitation or in expressing his or her views and opinions, or ideas, perhaps. That's good. The openness concept is what I'm looking for. Great.
Thanks,
Okay.
Omar.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so in the interest of time, because we do want to give you all a break, we will move forward for Brian with a motion. And Brian, I understand that we missed the second motion from the communications report. So I don't know if you want to start there.
Yeah, actually, it was the first motion, I believe, Sarah.
Okay.
And this one again was for 5.3 corporate identity, public image, and communication monitoring report. It was the call for motion that the board approve the registrar's interpretation of the policy as a reasonable interpretation. So I've missed that. Thank you, Carolyn, for pointing that out. If I could have a mover on that one.
So moved.
I heard two voices. I heard Stephen, I think Henry. So we'll go in that order. All in favor, hands up. Thank you very much for that. So I'll continue with the second two motions then for the 5.4, if I could. The first motion again will read that the board approve the registrar's interpretation of the policy as a reasonable interpretation. Have a mover?
Omar.
Samir and Omar. All in favor, hands up. Thank you. And last but not least, this second motion will read that the board agrees that the registrar CEO complied with the policy. Mover?
I will move.
That's
Second.
Mike Smart, and I heard a voice, but I saw Ingrid's hand, so I'm going to go with Ingrid. All in favor?
Poor Peggy.
Poor Peggy. I'll get you next time, Peg.
Doesn't matter as long as the job gets done.
Because we all want a break. That's why. Okay, Sarah, I guess you'll announce the breaking time.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll do break now. Fazal or Amy, do you want to have folks, do you want to do 15 minutes still or?
Yeah, you know what? Why don't we, I think, Brian, you would know the group better as far as 15 minutes would do it or 10 minutes would do it, up to you.
Yeah, 10 to 15. I guess let's go 15. It's been a good haul for the last hour and a half, sort of thing. And
Okay, so
well, I'll make sure that we get our back online, Fazal. Don't worry.
Perfect.
Okay, so we'll put up a timer, but we'll see everyone in 15 minutes. Just a reminder to mute yourselves and turn off your video when you go for break.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Sarah, are you available?
Henry, did you need anything?
Fazal, in those numbers we had for social media and that sort of thing, is that our YouTube take on council included in that? You're muted.
Sorry. I'm going to check with Carolyn. I don't think so. I think it's our major platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, that we get the stats on.
Yeah. Do we have any idea how many are online when we?
Yeah, we do know when they're online. So initially we had about 14 watching when we started streaming today.
And is that more as we progress doing this, or is it?
Yeah, like I think it was like 6, 7 in the beginning. So we are continuing to sort of promote it, but I think it's also going to depend on what's on the agenda and if it interests anybody. The good thing is
the Zoom world is becoming tiresome. I think a lot of people, I don't know what else they're involved in, but yeah.
It's getting fatiguing for sure. But the good thing is because we post our agendas and stuff, the schools or the association might step in and watch a specific portion.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah.
Certainly 14 is more than 1 or 2 in the audience.
Yeah, like we were barely getting anybody in the audience. It was always just our appointed members and stuff. So.
And ministry.
Yeah.
Sarah and Fazal, I'm just looking at the agenda. Now we've got a hard start at 1 o'clock with Lisa. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so depending on how this goes this morning, we may have a bit of a shaved down lunch hour, so to speak. If we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think we can get back on.
Guys, can I ask you a question? Are you, as opticians, using any credits such as this offered by the college to the participants?
Sorry, Dorena, were you speaking to me?
I was just launching this question to whomever is able to answer. If the people that want to listen into the meeting are allowed to request 3 credits for 3 hours as professional growth. Are we or you, any of you, is actually using this for your portfolio so I can get inspired? Just all.
Like they're definitely, whenever you watch any of these things, you can claim it for self-directed. Our college updates. Sorry, Dorena?
So are this hours of meeting self-directed or professional growth?
So I don't think we've submitted this for accreditation, for formal PG accreditation. So it would be considered self-directed hours.
Yeah, I announced that at the beginning of the meeting that it was 3 self-directed hours for today.
Okay, and I'm just gonna, I think we've got most folks back. We've got a couple folks still with webcams off. Fazal, do you want to wait or should we continue?
I think in the interest of time, the timer's up. We should probably move.
Yep. Yeah, because we have some time to make up. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Amy, the acting deputy registrar, and she'll take us through the life member designation.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone. Most of you are familiar with this process. These are, we've got, I believe, 4 applications in front of you today for life memberships. And these are, through our bylaws, come to you as the board to review for approval. You have briefing notes in front of you for each one of these individuals. I apologize, there are 3 individuals who have been nominated for life membership that are in front of you today. And each one of the briefing notes establishes that each one of these individuals qualifies for life membership based on the criteria set out in our bylaws. So in order to grant life membership to these individuals, the board is asked to vote in favor of that designation, and as long as 2/3 of the board votes in favor of it, life membership will be granted to the individual. So we are going to look at them one at a time. And if there are specific questions about the individuals or anything about their personal criteria outside of what's in this briefing note, I'll ask that you just let us know because we would then need to go in camera to have a more detailed discussion. So I do see a hand up from Mike to start. So maybe I'll pause there.
Now we are going to review them one at a time, but I'm just wondering if we could make one motion for all of them. So we don't do each one of them. I don't know if that saves time.
No, because we do need to approve them one at a time because they need to be approved by a 2/3 majority vote each. So I will start with the first application, and that's from Mr. Alfred Nason. And as you can see from the briefing note, this individual meets the criteria that's set out in the bylaws. So I'll turn that back over to Brian now for the motion.
Thanks, Amy. I will call for that motion. The motion will read to grant life membership status to Alfred Naxon.
I'll make the motion.
That's Ingrid, the seconder.
Amber.
Amber, all in favor? Passed. Do you want me to continue then, Amy? Do you need to explain the other ones, or?
Nope, you can go ahead, Brian.
Thank you very much. Second motion is going to be read as to grant life membership status to Lauren E. Pollock. I need a mover.
Henry.
Henry, seconder.
Steve.
Steve, all in favor, hands up. Passed, thank you. Last motion reads to grant life membership status to Robin Wynn Dickinson. I need a mover.
Diana.
Danetta, and seconder.
I heard Diana.
Diana, sorry. Okay, all in favor? Passed. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so thank you, everyone. With that, we're going to pass it back to Fazal, who's going to take us through the board policy achievement report.
So actually, this here, I think Mike is going to take us through this.
I think it is, Fazal.
Yeah.
If I can just take it from there then?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Everybody has the briefing notes in front of them, and the purpose of monitoring a report from 425 was to give us a chance to monitor the reports that the Registrar and CEO has given us. And you'll have it in the briefing notes. You'll see that Appendice A is the actual policy, 4.25. I hope I'm not going too fast. Then you have the Appendice 1, which is a schedule or calendar and how we were going to do the different topics or the different reports. I believe in our policy, we said that we were going to do 8 of them this year. This is the first of the 8. And the purpose of the board's policy achievement report is to monitor in greater detail the policies that pertain to the governance process and the board staff relationship on an ongoing basis. Last year, again, we agreed to do the Monitor 8 policies were up for consideration and evaluation directly. This is the first of those 8, and the policy number is 4-25 of the first of these ones to be monitored. So then if we go back, if I go to the policy or Appendix B, which is the report that I'm to give, you'll see that number 1, the staff did this nice chart for us so that we could follow. And this is the first time we've done it. So the board is committed to, number 1, the board is committed to thoroughly review the evaluation and monitoring reports that are provided and feedback to the registrar and CEO. We would have accomplished this by following Appendix 1 of the policy 4.25. And in 2020, the board reviewed these, and provided feedback necessary for monitoring these reports. And if you see, the only thing I've changed is to put the actual policy numbers so that you can go back to Appendix 1 and follow along where the actual policy is and whether we've done it, which we have. In evidence of that is the dates that show in the minutes that we had accomplished that. And so to me, there's no recommendations, and we've fully completed number 1. Number 2, the policy will have been automatic. The policy will be as automatic as possible and such that majority of the board's time can be spent focusing on design and the future. The board would have accomplished this from policy 425 in paragraph 2B of the policy. Now, this is just my recollection of what took place, but the registrars, as far as the evidence, the registrar's monitoring reports in 2020 were clear, understandable, and precise. The board was given time to read and answer questions, if any. The registrar supplied answers to any of the questions in a timely manner, and the board accepted and moved on. And again, I have no recommendation, and I feel that the reports were good and it was accomplished. So fully achieved. Number 3, the monitoring of the registrar CEO is considered synonymous with the monitoring the organizational performance. And we would have accomplished that by following paragraph 2C of policy 425 in the policy. And again, this is just me as far as evidence. The registrar presented monitoring report with measurable and reasonable interpretation of the policy, and the board accepted them as such. The board is monitoring its own organizational performance through the registrar. And again, I have no recommendations because I believe it was done and it was fully achieved. Then we go to number 4, which has been really good today as far as point 5.2 or 5.1 of the reports today. And we did those these questions that sort of redundant in this this part of it. Anyway, the board will record in the board's minutes the outcomes and evidence of the report, while whether the registrar and CEO's policy interpretations is reasonable and whether the evidence provided demonstrates the policy achievement. And we will have done that if we follow paragraph 4 of policy 425. And I found when we were going through that there was no evidence that this is being done. The registrar and CEO interpretation is reasonable, and that the evidence provided demonstrated achievement. So I was going to recommend that we start to either get a consensus or emotions for those 2 questions, and that be recorded in the minutes. So as you've seen today, it enlightened us with a lot of good conversation, and that this has taken place as today, and I think it went well.
So Mike, if I can just chime in for 1 sec.
Sure can.
Sure. So you've rated it a 1 because we haven't been doing, I just want to clarify so the board understands. So you've rated it a 1 and you've given the recommendations that there should be motions and 2 questions asked, which you pointed out that we're doing today. So
Yes.
Sort of backing it up, we have been doing the required monitoring reports, but we didn't sort of tie the bow on it with a formal motion. And
there was nothing that was recorded in the minutes that would lead us back to you to say that you've done it.
Yeah.
There's that you presented them, but there was nothing to answer those 2 questions,
right,
which are at the bottom of each.
Yeah.
Is
So
that
your
clear?
score is not a reflection that we didn't meet the monitoring reports. It's more that the monitoring reports weren't
Recorded.
motioned properly.
That's correct.
Yeah, perfect.
So after today, you could put that as a complete, but
Yeah, thank you.
whoever
Mike.
does this report next time, because this is the
Yes.
first time and it wasn't done before, they'll be able to say it's done.
Exactly, perfect.
Okay. So number 5, each year by January, February, the board will conduct a formal annual performance evaluation summary of the registrar and CEO. And we would have done that if we follow policy 4-25 as per paragraph 5. There is no evidence because it wasn't in place for 2020. In other words, the old format was done, I believe, in for Fazel's review. The board will approve the registrar's performance of the new policy, which is 3-27 in October of 2019, and the process template wasn't approved until 2020, mid 2020. So it wasn't available to be done, I guess is what I'm saying. And of course, the recommendation will be that they follow paragraph 5 of 425 in 2021. And then again, this is, it says one that hasn't been achieved, but it wasn't in place to be achieved. So
exactly.
in 2022, whoever does this report will have that as a 3. And I'm sure that the new people that I believe have already been picked to do the evaluation with the executive. So that is my report. I hope I wasn't
Thank you,
too
Mike.
quick.
Thanks, great overview. Any feedback or comments for Mike on this interpretation? Seeing Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Mike, great job for first time effort, and you ought to be commended for stepping up to the plate to be the first one to undertake this.
Thanks, Steve. I knew you told me it was going to be easy, but let me tell you, not so much. but we got it done, and I think moving forward, this template is going to be a godsend, just to follow one to the other as they move through the years.
That's great. Brian, additional comment or feedback?
Yeah, just for clarification, Fazel, we don't have a motion on this particular presentation, but do I gather, Mike, that you maybe would wish to have a motion done on this one as a starting point?
Yes, when I was asking whether the 2 questions, whether we just recorded in the minutes, whether it was a motion or a consensus as far as the report, but I believe that this report or any monitoring report of the years past should be a motion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Can you word the motion?
I certainly can, I think.
If that's acceptable, Fazel, I think it's probably a good idea to have a jump off point at having this as a motion.
Sure.
That the motion should read that the board evaluation success and implement the board monitoring system 425 as presented.
Very good, Mike. Thank you very much. So
that's
I
just
believe
a recommendation.
Yeah, Caroline can articulate that in the minutes as far as that particular motion goes, but I will call for a motion on that therefore then and ask for a mover and a seconder.
I so move.
Okay, you're going to move it, and I saw Murray's hand up. He's seconding it. All in favor, hands up. Passed. Thanks very much, Mike. Very, very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So I'll pass it back to Amy now, Acting Deputy Registrar, for the review of the College Performance Measurement Framework with the board.
Thanks, Sarah. So this is a piece that those of you who are not new to the board have been hearing about for the last year or so. And we're finally coming to you with the first draft of our report. So just to give some context, this is a new process that has been launched by the Ministry of Health as a way to measure the performance of the 26 health regulatory colleges in the province in a way that is easier and more efficient. So I think at this meeting last year in February, the whole board actually heard from a speaker from the Ministry of Health who was talking about the progress in this project that they were planning to launch in 2020. And so now we come to you a year later. The ministry did spend the year continuing its consultation process and its development process and launched the formal framework in December of 2020. So this is a new annual requirement. Every college is going to be submitting this report once a year on March 31st for the previous year's statistics. So this inaugural year, they've asked the colleges to complete this report based on our numbers and information from the year 2020. And this is going to be considered somewhat of a baseline year where there's an opportunity for everyone to become accustomed to this new reporting feature and for the ministry to essentially consolidate and review the reports, not for the purpose of providing colleges with particular performance feedback, but more to identify opportunities for improvement and create some overarching summaries of what their takeaways are after reviewing these reports from a system level. So we're now coming to the end of February, and this report is going to be submitted to the ministry on or before March 31st. So we are coming to the board at this point with our draft to get some feedback and to present this to you. Just wanted to note that there may still be some edits that are done. We're still working in consultation with both the ministry and the other colleges to make sure that everyone's on the same page about how to interpret some of the measurements that they've asked for. And of course, just to clarify any language or style things as we finalize this report. So there may be some edits that are made after today, but they will be minor in nature and really not to any of the substantive takeaways from the report. So we're asking the board to review it and give your approval in principle that this is ready to be submitted to the ministry. So what we're really asking you to look for here, this is obviously a very lengthy and detailed report. It's much more detailed than, say, the annual reports that have typically come to this board once a year about, our internal statistics. This is also asking colleges to report on a whole bunch of measures and standards that have to do with things like governance and all the other departments of the college. So I think the things that we really want to draw your attention to here in this draft are that for each one of the standards, they have asked the colleges to report whether we fulfill the standard, we fulfill it partially, or we don't fulfill it. So in completing this report, we noted that for approximately 65% of the measures, we were able to already indicate full compliance. And then in a further 32%, we indicated partial compliance. So that's overall 97% of the measures that were either part of the way toward or fully compliant on, which, we have yet to see how the other colleges will be indicating their results, but our sense is that we're in fairly good shape based on these initial standards, because these are, of course, things that were only made known to the colleges quite late in the calendar year. But every time there is an indication of either partial or non-compliance with a particular standard, the ministry has also asked whether there are any improvements planned for the upcoming reporting period, which in our case is going to be the year 2021. So in the briefing note, I've highlighted a few areas for the board just to draw your attention to of things that we've indicated on this report that we do plan to make improvements to in the coming year. And we want you to be aware of these, because if there are any that are anything that the board has questions about or things that there may need to be changes to, this is a great time to have that discussion. So that we submit this report with, you know, a clear indication of what the board's plans are. And I will say that all of these are things that are in line with the board's strategic plan that was, of course, put in place a year ago. So fortunately, I think we've been on this path, and if anything, these are things that you know, we have already had on our radar of things that we were wanting to achieve, things that the board has been wanting to achieve here at the college. So the first one is developing a competency framework for our professional board members, and that will be something that they would want to see tied to eligibility for election. So as you know, there's already been discussion of that in our strategic planning sessions. There was already a competency framework that was developed and put in place for our appointed committee members, and this was a next step that has already been on the radar of the board. There's also a potential commitment in this report to exploring options for having a regular third-party assessment of the board's effectiveness. So again, as you know, you have been engaging in self-evaluations on an annual basis for a number of years now. But one of the standards that the ministry has asked the colleges to report on is whether from time to time, say every 3 years, there is a third party that's actually coming in to give their own assessment of the board's effectiveness, so that you're balancing your self-evaluation with a third party for objectivity. Third, there is a standard that is referred to in the CPMF about conflict of interest declaration process, where we've indicated that we're part of the way there, but would like to enhance that process in order to be able to indicate full compliance down the road. There are some standards that have to do in the framework to do with the transparency of executive committee meetings. Now, again, we're on good track for that because our executive committee meetings, they're summarized for you on a quarterly basis in your committee reports. So we do have that information, but it appears from the CPMF that the ministry is looking for, you know, perhaps a more transparent way to come upon that information in some respects. So we're going to potentially be looking at that process. And finally, the last item on this list, just to draw your attention to, is something that has already been on this board's radar and was highlighted directly in your strategic plan, and which is making a risk assessment more central to the process that we use for developing standards, guidelines, and policies. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions or comments.
Okay, questions or comments for Amy on the draft? Steve?
Yep, thanks, Sarah. Amy, I'm glad that we're doing this because when the current government came to power, they wanted two things in organizations: accountability and transparency to the public. And this only furthers their goal of where they're going. And we're just following in the footsteps and just being open to everyone.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Ingrid, question or comment?
Sorry, I just had to get my mouse on that. Yeah, a whole lot of work. It's crazy the amount of hours you guys must have put into this. But I really like that you were able to point out further down the document where there's been, you know, policies waiting at the government since 2017. And I wonder how they're going to address that when they perhaps read this document sometime in the future.
Thanks, Ingrid. Yeah, I think, you know, transparency and accountability apply to everyone. So there's, you know, certainly, you know, some hope there, I think.
Okay. Okay, so if there's no further comments or questions, I'll do a test for, oh, I see one. Thank you to the staff for the report. I'll do a quick test of high five to see moving forward with this draft report to a motion. Can I see a show of hands? Okay, so Brian, I'm going to pass to you for a motion.
Thank you, Sarah. So this particular motion will read to approve the draft 2020 CPMF report, subject to edits. Can I have a mover?
Elsa?
Okay, and I saw Amber's hand up first. Sorry, Murray, you'll be next. All in favor, hands up. Passed, thank you.
Okay, super. So we're going to move on to treating spouses regulation, and I'll pass that again to Amy.
Sorry, Sarah, can I just step in for one quick sec?
Absolutely.
Sorry, Amy. I just wanted to say, Ingrid, I think you pointed it out how big this report was. I just wanted to quickly just give a hat tip to Amy was the big lead on this, and Fizza actually were both part of HPRO working groups and things to get a handle on how this report works. And then the entire team, once we figured out what the report's supposed to look like, the entire team was in high gear to get this done because it only was released in December. And we only had basically January and part of February to fill in a complete report. So all the departments were running to get these things done on top of their regular jobs. So it was a huge, huge effort. It'll get easier in the coming years now that we know what I think to look for. But this was initially Melanie was on this. Amy was really the lead. Fizza was a big part of weekly meetings and things as well, and then the rest of the team. So thank you to my team.
Great, thank you. Kudos to the staff for all the hard work on that. Okay, so Amy, I will pass it to you now for 9.0.
Thanks, Sarah. So those of you who have been involved with the college for some time, this topic has quite a bit of history to it. I did try to lay it out in the briefing note for you. So I'll try to keep it very brief, but what's important to know is this is a question about whether the board would like to pursue seeking a new regulation or regulatory amendment that would make an exemption for registered opticians from the provisions of the Regulated Health Professions Act and the Health Professions Procedural Code that currently bar any health professional from treating their spouse. And that prohibition really comes from the sexual abuse provisions of the code, which make it an act of sexual abuse for any health professional to have for there to be any overlap between a sexual relationship and a patient-practitioner relationship. Now, there's a long history to what that has meant for persons who are spouses. There has been a strict prohibition for a long time under the legislation to this. But starting in 2013, there was an amendment made to the RHPA that said it would be possible for colleges to make a regulation that would permit their registrants to treat spouses, as long as there's no sexual conduct or anything of that nature that occurs during the treatment. And spouse, in this case, is the legal definition of spouse, so someone who is legally married or meets the definition for common law. It would not apply, for example, to anyone else in a committed relationship. So under the code, it is considered sexual abuse to be in a sexual relationship with someone that is a patient. This would make it possible to take the circumstance out of that consideration when we're talking about spouses. It does not mean that it's an endorsement for opticians to treat their spouse. What it would mean is that if there were to be a treatment of someone who was a spouse, it would be considered under different legal framework. That would be more akin to, say, treating a family member than treating someone who you're in a sexual relationship with. So what ended up happening with this, the history of this regulation, is that after those amendments came through in 2013, a number of colleges, including this one, started exploring whether this would be the right option for their college. Some of them said no. For example, persons involved in psychotherapy or psychology were not interested in pursuing this type of exemption. But other colleges decided that this might be an appropriate exemption for their registrants and put in draft regulations to that effect. Now, this college was exploring the option, but did not get to the point where it submitted an application to the ministry asking for this exemption or for a regulation to that effect. And the reason is that shortly after these amendments were made to the code, there started to be a whole lot more news and focus on the ministry and on the health colleges on combating sexual abuse among health professionals. And in fact, there was a task force that was initiated in 2014 by the then Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, Dr. Eric Hoskin. And when that task force was launched, the colleges were basically told that this was not going to be the appropriate time to look at exemption regulations for treating spouses. This was not going to be a priority item. What was the priority was addressing this task force to address sexual abuse. So at that time, only one college, which is the Royal College of Dental Surgeons of Ontario, had a regulation that had been approved. All other colleges that submitted regulations for approval had them put on hold, and they were not addressed since, until now. So what has changed? Well, in 2019 and into 2020, this subject started to reach the news again in a number of ways. So it came to the attention both of the newspapers and of the ministry that perhaps it was the time to start looking at whether these exemptions should be granted again. Some of the stories involved health practitioners and other professions losing their license as a result of having treated their spouses in circumstances that I think most people agreed were not a threat to the public interest. And there was some feeling that it might be time to revisit these regulations. And in fact, since that time, 3 colleges who had submitted regulations back in 2014 had those regulations approved, including the College of Optometrists of Ontario, and 3 other colleges who submitted regulations have regulations that are now potentially going to be approved in the coming weeks. They were already circulated for stakeholder feedback in late December and early January. So these regulations are on the move again, and the ministry, we have been in touch with them, and they have said that there is, they are open to receiving new submissions for regulations. So at this time, this is coming to the board now to make a decision about whether this is something the board wishes to explore. And if so, which committee you would like to assign this to. Typically, we would have a committee look at the specifics and come back to the board with a recommendation. So we're not deciding today whether to absolutely go ahead with making a suggestion for this regulation. It would be a decision to assign it to a committee for further examination. So I'll pause there.
Okay, thoughts from the group on whether there's interest in moving forward to explore this further? I'm seeing Brian and then Zamir.
Amy, I'm just reviewing my my notes, and that there was a potential motion to send this to a committee if we had decided upon that. Is there an overlap between the Patient Relations Committee and the Clinical Practice Committee? Could both of them be involved with this, or would we want just one particular committee?
So it might actually be a good idea to have both committees look at it, because the Patient Relations Committee's mandate is, of course, to make sure that the processes of the college are patient-focused. And this falls squarely, I think, within that mandate because of the public interest impact that it has, and considering it from the angle of what the public would expect and what patients would expect from their healthcare professionals. The reason why clinical practice may wish to also visit this is because if there were to be a regulation that exempted opticians from treating from the bar on treating spouses, there would need to be standards and guidelines developed around that, because opticians would need to have some guidance on when it's appropriate, what the parameters are, how, whether they understand informed consent in the context of treating their spouse, and things like that. So it would require, I think, some involvement from clinical practice. Now, it's up to the board whether both committees look at it at this stage, or for the purpose of exploration, that it stay with patient relations with a view to having clinical practice become more involved if you decide to go forward.
Thanks, Amy. Faisal, did you want to weigh in before I get to other questions? Oh, and you're just muted.
Sorry about that. I was just going to echo what Amy was saying. Is I would say, for the ease, put it in the jurisdiction of patient relations so they can get their hands all over it, and then hand it off to clinical practice for a set of eyes as far as operationalizing certain things and pieces that they'd want to include in the standards of practice type of thing.
Okay, thanks, Fazal. Samir and then Mike.
Thank you. Question actually, Amy addresses it really, really very well, explained the roles of different committee into this matter. My thought was around the same idea that we wish if we can assign this task to either or both of the committee and then have them maybe possibly stakeholders feedback to support that and then maybe execute it from there.
Okay, thanks, Samir. Mike, something to add?
Not really. I was just wondering for Amy, a time frame and the priority of getting this going, because it has to go to stakeholders. And if the government is approving it, do we have sort of a time frame moving forward that you can give us to make our decision on?
Well, that's a tough question, Mike, because the last time colleges submitted these for approval, it took 7 years. So I think we're hopeful that because they've indicated an openness to considering these regulations, that the time frame would be much shorter. It would also be a very, very simple regulation. It would be one section that would be aligned with the same language that has already been approved for a number of other regulatory colleges. That being said, these things do not happen very quickly. I think if the board were to give the green light to have patient relations explore this, the plan would be to bring this back to your meeting in May for the board to make a formal decision about whether to submit this to the ministry or not. At that point, we would still need to circulate it to our stakeholders before submitting. And then once it's submitted to the ministry, there are a number of back and forth steps that happen at that level. And they also must post a regulation to the regulation registry for a further round of circulation at that level before it could be improved. So we're talking at least a year at the very, very quickest.
Thanks, Amy. So I'm not hearing any concerns to move forward to a committee. Before we get to that step, so that we can capture it in the minutes, I'll ask the board if they can identify what they consider to be the public interest rationale for this decision. Can someone offer up what the public interest rationale might be for a decision to explore this further?
Omar, I think it'd be a major presence of conflict of interest.
Oh, I'm not sure if you froze, Omar. Are you still there?
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Oh,
you can hear me now?
there
Sorry.
you are.
Yeah. I was thinking more along the line of the elements of conflict of interest. You know, how would it be viewed through the public eyes in light of when this become to materialize?
In terms of concerns about how the public might view it, or do you see that as being in the public's best interest? Just for clarity.
How it will be viewed through the lens of the public. I don't know if Amy can add some light on that in terms of the conflict of interest principles, because any meetings, every agenda we ask for is a declaration of conflict of interest. So I don't know if this a step forward would compound such an issue. I don't know. Just thinking.
Amy, any comments on that?
Well, I guess, Omar, what the point of having this discussion is to try and articulate from the public's perspective what they might feel about a decision like this and how it might, whether you think it's in the public interest or whether it might not be in the public interest. So if there's a particular concern that you think that moving forward with this would be contrary to the public interest, that's why we want to have this discussion. But conversely, if there are reasons why some people might feel it might be in the public interest to pursue it, we would look for that input as well.
Okay. Thanks, Amy. And then in the interest of time, I'll just move to Mike and Murray and Peggy for a brief comment before we move to a motion. Mike?
Just to answer, I think it's important to note that the one of the O's has already been approved in the optometry. So I think it means a lot that we follow suit with them. So that's just a comment.
Okay. Murray?
I think it would be a positive step in the public interest for removing confusion and understanding in this aspect. I think there would be a lot of benefits to the public in clarifying this situation.
Okay, and Peggy, something to add there?
Sorry, got a mute problem. If I take the position of spouse is a member of the public, so as a spouse, there are a lot of things you trust your spouse with, and hopefully you can trust your spouse with your eyeglasses. And one might want to do that. And I don't believe that there would be any reason that says they have to. So it just gives them more options. It gives them the option of turning to their spouse for their optionary care, but they equally still have an opportunity to go elsewhere should they choose. So I think we should go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to do a test now for agreement just to move forward to the Patient Relations Committee to explore this further. Can I see a show of hands on comfort moving forward with that recommendation? Okay, so Brian, will pass to you for a motion, and I think we're looking for some proposed wording.
Yeah, I've got proposed wording, I think, as a potential motion already, Sarah.
Great.
Therefore, then to explore the possibility, or I guess this won't be a possibility, to suggest that we send this to the Patient Relations Committee for consideration and to bring a recommendation back to the board. Can I have a mover on that? That's
See
Peggy.
Ingrid? Oh.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, I missed that one. Sarah, did you say Ingrid and then Peggy?
I saw Ingrid's hand, yeah.
And I said I would second.
Okay, so we've got a first and second. Are all in favor? Passed. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we're going to move back to Amy with the status of the board's self-evaluation action plan.
Thanks, Sarah. So this is just a brief update since your last meeting on your 2020 action plan, which is what came out of the board's 2019 self-evaluation. So we just wanted to give you an update that most of the items on this list have their status indicated as complete. One of the items, so item 2 in the chart, is indicated as in progress, but it's related to reassessing the board's strategic outcomes policy. And there is actually a meeting taking place tomorrow to look at that in a strategic planning session. So as of tomorrow, we'll be able to switch that in progress to a complete. But I did just want to touch base with the board on the final item in your chart, which is item number 16. And it was highlighted in your briefing note. So that action plan item was something that was deferred from 2019, and it was about enhancing the board's cohesion by prioritizing the board as the primary decision-making body as opposed to the executive committee. So quite a bit of progress has been made on that front. So for example, it's indicated in the action plan progress. We noted that there were updates to the terms of reference for executive committee at the July meeting. And in 2020, as you'll see from the executive committee's annual report that's in your materials today, the committee only transacted matters that were considered urgent and time sensitive, or where they're exercising their functions as the finance committee for the most part. So what we just wanted to highlight for you is we've still indicated this is in progress because, you know, coming into 2020, there were some plans to perhaps look and explore other governance reforms related to the role of executive committee. But there were first a few sort of systemic issues that arose in 2020, as you well know, that have taken some of the bandwidth of the college into prioritizing things like response to the COVID pandemic, and also looking at the newly launched college performance measurement framework in terms of shaping what the standards the college is going to be held to with respect to its executive committee. So the recommendation here is to get some feedback from you as a board on where we would like to take this action plan item. And just to give some context, one of the roles that executive committee played on a fairly regular basis, especially in the spring of 2020, was to approve a couple of pandemic relief related items on an urgent basis using its authority as the board. And it did permit the college to be very nimble in responding to the conflict, as opposed to having to call the full board together in order to, for example, get certain guidelines approved and before our registrants in a timely and urgent way. Similarly, as was noted to you when we were reviewing the CPMF, there is a standard that we're looking at as part of the work plan for this year about the role of executive committee. So there are some plans to continue work on this during 2021. And one suggestion I might make to the board and get your feedback on is to consider whether this be moved to the 2021 action plan and with sort of necessary adjustments in light of the systemic changes that have happened in the regulatory environment since this goal was set. So I'll pause there and turn it over to the board for discussion.
Okay, any feedback from the board in terms of next steps? Ingrid?
Yeah, I think that anything that's in progress, if it's not completed, at this stage, whether that's today or tomorrow, should be moved to the 2021 so we don't lose track of where it is.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts? Amy, does that give you enough feedback on that item to move forward in terms of next steps?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Oh, Ingrid, did you have your hand up again, or was that?
Yeah, I can just add that I think it's great to have these in a table like this so that we can see what's done and what isn't done. I like to refer to it, and this is a good view for everybody to see.
Good.
They actually are posted to our website publicly as well.
Right.
And that's a way of us demonstrating to the public that the board is making good on its action plan.
Great. Okay, thank you for that, Amy. So we don't need to do a motion or anything on this piece, and we'll move into our last item before we break for lunch. So I'm going to invite Jay Batt, Chair of Patient Relations, to present on the land acknowledgement.
Hello, good morning, everybody. So I'm here today just to present, obviously I'm new to the committee. This is my first year as the chair. So I'd just like to acknowledge the previous work done by the previous committee, and I'll be presenting their work today. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jay, and I am the chair of the Patient Relations Committee. Today, I'm speaking to you from where I live on the traditional and ancestral unceded territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. I respect the long-standing relationships with First Nations people in this place, in the 100-mile Windsor-Essex Peninsula, and the Straits of Detroit. I was actually born in Windsor, so I've lived here all my life, 40 plus years. And I endeavor to carry myself with gratitude and humility as I work, learn, and live in this area. I'm sure everybody's already gone over the briefing notes about the land acknowledgements. I'd just like to add to that, that providing a land acknowledgement at the beginning of a meeting gives time for reflection and demonstrates recognition of Indigenous lands, treaties, and peoples. It involves thinking about what happened in the past and what changes can be made going forward in order to further the reconciliation process. They commemorate Indigenous peoples' principal kinship to the land, and that they are starting place to a change in how the land is seen and talked about. Land acknowledgements also help redefine how people place themselves in relation to First Peoples. I started out with a land acknowledgement kind of relevant to where I am virtually seated right now. We all have a copy of the land acknowledgement presented to us by Mr. George Cauchi at our last training. And that would be relevant to when we're having meetings at the college, whereas we'd like to just add in the aspect of the virtual meetings and have the chairs of the committees or the boards be able to acknowledge the area which they're presenting from. So I think at that point, we could probably just go over what we're looking for here is sorry. I'll just go over the land acknowledgement that was proposed to us by Mr. Cauchi. The land I am standing on today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee. Excuse my mispronunciation, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. The committee proposes the following. This acknowledgement directly relates to the land the College of Opticians sits upon and could be incorporated as part of a personal introduction at any in-person board or committee meetings. Now that the college has pivoted to a virtual environment, whereas persons are in different geographical spaces, a land acknowledgement could be tailored to acknowledge the land on which the College of Opticians sits and or the location where the meeting chair is located as a personal introduction when speaking. And also that the board introduce additional cultural awareness, safety, and humility training information sessions throughout the year. And at that point, I'd just like to hand it back over to, I believe, Sarah or Brian.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation, Jay. Is
You're
there feedback or comments from the board on this topic and the recommendations? See Steve?
Thanks, Sarah. I think it's imperative that we follow through with this and continue to take the training.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Murray?
Yeah, a clarification question to the chair. Is the recommendation that each person that speaks during the meeting acknowledge the lands at which they sit on or stand on or reside in?
Well, actually, Murray, how it would work, as far as my understanding goes, is at the beginning of our mandated college board meetings, we would start with a land acknowledgement. Depending on if we're back to in-person meetings, it would be the prepared version, which acknowledges the area of Toronto. Whereas if we're speaking virtually, we would ask like possibly just the chair of the various committees possibly start with a land acknowledgement of their own to accompany the land acknowledgement from the college.
Murray, does that clarify for you?
It does, although it adds a supplemental question as to the education of each of the chairs to even understand the lands at which they reside.
If I could, I do have board and committee chairs and vice chairs should research and personalize their own land acknowledgements. Mr. Cauchi is not being asked to do land acknowledgements for everyone. He has provided the college with our basically our acknowledgement for the college office. I think it would be up to the various chairs of the committee to come up with to do a little bit of research and come up with an acknowledgement of their own that's relevant to their area.
And Fazal, further clarification?
I was just going to say we would definitely support the chairs and vice chairs. As far as if there was assistance needed, we could always tap Mr. Cauchi or any other consultants in this area to help develop required land acknowledgements. So we wouldn't leave it totally to the chair or vice chair on their own. We would get support for them.
I see comments from Ingrid and Peggy. So why don't we start with you, Ingrid?
Are we, would this be for chairs that are speaking at the meeting, or just everybody who's attending?
If I could answer that, if we had a committee meeting, we would start our committee meeting with the land acknowledgement of where the chair is located. Whereas when it's a full board meeting, it would be started with the acknowledgement that's provided for the college.
Thanks, Jay. I think that's good clarification for folks. Peggy.
It may be time consuming, but I think it would be nice and educational if everyone acknowledged the land that they're on from where they are. So, you know, Jay was talking about Windsor, and I have been unaware of, you know, which group were near Windsor. I grew up near Brantford, so I'm well aware of everything for the Six Nations because of the discussions that went on, you know, in my youth. So I think it would be nice. I think we'd want to keep it shorter than the whole long acknowledgement, that everybody could come on and say, I'm sitting on such and such land at the beginning of a board meeting. And it's about reconciling with all of the natives throughout Ontario.
Okay, so Peggy, your suggestion would be at the beginning that everyone would do that introduction. Are there comments or thoughts with respect to that from other board members? Fazal, yeah. Oh, and you're muted.
I think there's some nuances to this, and I think the general ask is about does the board want to embrace land acknowledgements and then the education that follows. We could maybe ask patient relations. Oh, sorry, is it Jay? This is with patient relations, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so we could ask patient relations to kind of work out the details and propose some more options. At least we could get the ball rolling for the college. And then as far as committee meetings goes, we could look at more of the mechanics and things like that. And I know Deidre just messaged me that she has a lot of resources on this. We don't even have to look too far outside. So if there's any nuances, maybe we can put it to the committee and let them figure it out offline, I should say.
Okay. Okay, so I think maybe we'll do, I'm going to do two tests for consensus here. The first test being that we move forward with the land acknowledgements, and to Fazal's point, there may be some nuances that get sorted out, but that the group has an interest in moving forward with the land acknowledgements. So can I see a show of a fist of 5 for that piece? Okay, that's good. Seeing, okay. Thank you. And then the second piece is that the board wants to continue participating in cultural safety and humility training. And another fist of 5 for that one. Okay. Perfect. See Diana there. Okay, great. Okay, so with that, the last piece is just, again, for the record, the public interest rationale for these decisions. If someone wanted to just make a couple quick notes for that piece. Would maybe we could designate one person to just kind of give a quick summary on what the public interest rationale might be. The faster someone volunteers, the faster your lunch is.
I saw Henry's hand up.
Henry, yes.
Yeah, I think the fact that this is being done, I think the fact that we had that speaker at the last board meeting, I think that we're doing this indicates how sensitive we are to this. And I think the public's into this, they'll understand, hey, they're really serious about this business. So I think that's great.
Okay. Thank you, Henry. So with that, Brian, I will move to you for a motion.
Thanks, Sarah. So we're going to have two motions here. The first motion is going to read that the board approve the traditional land acknowledgements to read at the beginning of board and committee meetings of the college as recommended by the Patient Relations Committee. I need a mover.
Diana.
Sorry?
Diana.
Diana
Diana.
moves it. Dorina seconds it. All in favor? Hands up. Thank you. Second motion is going to read that the board and appointed members continue participating in cultural safety and humility training throughout the year. I've got Samir's hand up as a mover.
I will second.
That was Mike, seconder. All in favor? Hands up. It's passed.
Okay, thanks everyone. So we've eaten a little bit into lunch, pun intended, and we do have a hard start at 1. So we will ask, oh, go ahead, Fazal.
I did speak to our speaker for 1 o'clock. We can push her 10 minutes.
Okay. So do you want to come back at 1:10 then? Give folks a 55-minute lunch break.
Beautiful.
Okay, so again, we'll put the timer on, reminders to mute and turn your video off, and enjoy your lunch. We'll see you at 1:10.
Sarah, quick question for you.
Yes.
Those 3 questions that you pose in terms of public interest, I would really like to have that in front of me. So if you could email it to me, I want to put it up on my bulletin board in front of me so that that's always registering when we're, especially as a public member. Okay.
The 3 questions.
I think 3 or 4, whatever you had there at the start, remember?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes,
Remember?
Absolutely. Yes,
The public
question,
interest.
Yes, the questions to consider as you're voting on a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to, and I'm going to put it in bold letters up on my bulletin board here, and then it's in front of me at a board meeting or when I'm
Yes.
going through committee stuff.
Absolutely, we can make sure that you get that.
Thanks.
Good question, Henry.
You can leave that with us, Henry. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Same way.
Happy lunch.
was going for the sweep shot there. A loud appeal for LBW.
Zell. You-
Hey, Mike.
How are you? You got 2 minutes to tell me how your dad is.
Oh, he's doing well. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I was wondering. I hadn't chatted in a while, so
Yeah. Thank you for asking, Mike.
everybody's doing well. That's good.
Yeah, it's good, Mike. I think with things hopefully opening up, people are getting back to their doctor's appointments and all of these things.
Yeah, I got to go to the doctor's this afternoon, so hopefully we get done at 3:10 because I had to be there at 3:30. So
Yeah, I think we'll keep good pace.
I think we went really good after
Yeah.
having to do those things for you.
The
Brought
reports.
on a lot of conversation though.
Who's running?
Answering those 2 questions. Sorry.
Who's
Hi, Peggy.
who's running the meeting from the staff tomorrow?
Probably Carolyn.
Is she on right now? No. Um, my daughter has a follow-up appointment that's at 9:30. I think that we're supposed to start at 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Mhm.
So if I actually go with her, probably the earliest I would be back in would be 10:30. If I put it on the phone and she goes on her own, and I'm hopeful that I'm available at 10, but I just wanted to let whomever know if I'm not there at the start, I'll join when I can.
Absolutely.
And not worry about, trying to rattle my chain of
Yeah. And the nice thing is you can join by cell phone, so we'll make it happen. Okay, everybody, we are live.
Are we ready to go?
I think so. It's the countdown, the suspense countdown.
I'm watching that clock. Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. Thank you very much for that abbreviated lunch, or so to speak. Anyway, I'm going to hand it back over to Fazal because he is going to introduce one of our colleagues, Lisa from BC, and we're always anxious to hear what BC is up to.
Yeah, Brian, you kind of took care of it. Yeah, it's Lisa Bannerman, our registrar from the College of Opticians of British Columbia, who's on the line with us. And Lisa's been sort of making regular check-ins with us, giving the board an update as to what regulatory reform is looking like out in British Columbia. So there's a lot of talk all the time about reform, and Lisa is in the thick of it. And so Lisa, thank you for joining us. Hopefully it's not too early over there.
No, all good. We're good. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay, good. I actually came into the office today and then realized I didn't bring my little headset. So
you sound good.
I was going to be like, okay, great. It's always great to talk to you guys. And yeah, happy to update you on what's going on here in BC. So I think you will remember that with the revised proposal that came out from the steering committee in August, there were a number of the same recommendations as the original proposal, but there were a few changes as well. So I can kind of tell you where we're at. As you, I'm sure, are not surprised, things are not moving super fast.
Lisa, can I just pause you for a sec? When you last spoke to us last year, the proposal was on the table to merge or reduce the 20 colleges down to 5.
5. Okay, I haven't talked to you since then, I guess. Okay. So the revised proposal that came out in August made one change to the number of colleges, and that was from 20 down to 6. So the new grouping is the College of Physicians and Surgeons and the podiatric surgeons have now joined the College of Physicians and Surgeons. The nurses and midwives, they have now amalgamated. So the nurses went through their 3 different nursing or 4 different nursing groups into one, and now they've taken on the midwives as well. Pharmacists. And then number 4 is an oral health care college. So the dentists, the dental hygienists, the techs, denturists, that entire group. And they are they are kind of working on getting this amalgamation for their group going right now. And then the last was 2 multi-profession colleges, so 5 and 6, with 5 being the complementary and alternative health and care professions, and then number 6 being the allied health and care professions. So there were a lot of questions from those of us proposed to be in 5 and 6 as to why it was split, because originally they had all of us together in college number 5. So we were told that it was feedback based on the responses that they'd had to the original proposal. But I can tell you that from my understanding and discussion with my colleagues, that certainly didn't come from any of the colleges that are proposed to be in 5 and 6. So the feedback to split the alternative and complementary group away from the allied group, we don't know where that came from for sure. There's speculation, but it didn't appear to come from the professions that are within that group. And that would include its naturopathic doctors, chiropractors, traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, and massage therapy that are proposed to be in that. Everybody else is in the allied group. That would be opticians, optometrists, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, psychology. It's quite a large, varied group as far as, scope, which is interesting and will make it very challenging. So to date, kind of what we've been working on is a review of the legislation, because it's our understanding that they hope to have the changes to the Health Professions Act go through in the spring sitting of the legislature. I don't think that's going to happen. We're now being told it's more likely fall, but I'm not sure. So we had multiple meetings as the large group, like all of the regulated health professions with the ministry, to kind of go through the existing HPA and what works, what doesn't work in the various sections. And so that was great to have lots of feedback and open dialogue with them about changes that we'd like to see made to all of those different areas. We weren't really consulted about any of the pieces that are proposed to be new under the proposal. And that includes profession-specific councils for the multi-profession colleges, and also maybe changes to the mechanism for amalgamation, because the way it's worded right now is very clunky and awkward. It basically is that one large entity has to take on another, but both cease to exist at a point in time, meaning the boards of both have to be abolished and then the new board put into place. So it kind of stops everything. So if you've got one large college like the nurses who could take on and fund and set everything up in the background, but then everything could stop and start again, it worked. I think with 7 of us or more, it would be challenging. Plus, the ministry is saying that any new professions that come up for regulation, and there are a few, like radiology, there's a couple other professions that are kind of sitting waiting, that they will have to join one of either the 5th or the 6th college. So we don't want this mechanism where we have to completely stop, start, change name, get a new board every time we bring in a new profession. So as a group of 11 colleges, all of those proposed to be in the 5th and 6th, we have kind of done a little bit of work on what would be our recommendations for the profession-specific councils and the changes to the amalgamation, and anything else that we felt was identified in the proposal that needs to be considered in the legislation. And I'm sure that you can imagine, with 11 registrars with varied backgrounds, we have 3 lawyers, I believe, 2 that are former ministry staff, a couple of MBAs, and then some from the profession. Everybody has a very different feeling about what the important first step is in this process. And it's causing us some issues, to put it bluntly. We can't come to concrete decisions on what we want to send the minister to say, you know, we would like to see in the legislation, because some are making it extremely prescriptive. And then there's others of us who are saying, no, I think it should be a little bit more broad in the legislation, and then maybe go into more detail in bylaw. So yeah, we're at a point where we're a little bit stuck. I would say that, you know, you need to align yourself with people who are thinking the same way. There are a group of us in that 11 who work really well together and I think would be fine. There's 8 of us that I think could carry on right now and we would be great, no problem. But it's a mixture of those proposed to be in the 5th college and the 6th college. So yeah, we have a call set up this afternoon, actually, with some of the senior staff from APRA, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. They're the Australian health regulators. So it's some of the people who are involved in the initial setup, and they're going to kind of give us their feedback on what has worked, what they would have done differently. And I'm hopeful that that might, you know, give us a little bit more direction here going forward. So we have that booked at 2 o'clock my time today. And then immediately following that, our group of 11 is going to continue some of our discussions. The other thing that we have agreed as a group to do is hire someone, contract with someone to kind of do a bit of a business case for us. So we've put it out for an RFP. We had our responses. I think the group that's making the decision, tasked with making the decision has. So we'll find that out this afternoon as well. But it's very short turnaround. We're asking for this by the end of March, but they're going to look at everybody's finances, staffing, contracts, leases, all of that, and kind of do an overall picture of where everybody is currently, what they could bring to the amalgamation, and hopefully what kinds of funds we might need in support of making this happen. And we've asked for it to be one big multi-profession college, 2 separate multi-profession colleges as the proposal indicated, or even the option for us to maybe do a couple of different breakdowns in there as well. So just so we have some idea on what the difference in the funding is going to be. So that's kind of where we're sitting at right now. The other big piece that we're working on that was included with this new proposal was the addition of cultural safety and humility. And so that is another big push. And I think we are going to have some work done on this that we would be able to share with other provinces. So I sat through quite an interesting presentation last week, and we are taking this on as the BC health regulators as a group and contributing funds. And we believe that government will be contributing funds as well to do development of like training modules and a toolkit for regulators, basically to help them, introduce this into your, all of your different processes, and how to include it as a standards and, into your complaints process and all of the various things that we'll need to be thinking about.
Perfect.
Yeah. So any specific questions?
I'll actually turn it to Sarah to facilitate a discussion there.
Yeah, we can open it to the board if folks have any feedback or comments or questions for the clarification for Lisa on the items that she presented. Yeah, Brian.
Lisa, you had mentioned that there was some camaraderie with at least 8 of the number of individuals. What, as you're representing the opticians of BC, what first steps would you like to see happen?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I really just need to know who we're working with. I think for me, that's kind of the number one. And I can tell you right now that if it is the group of 11, it's not going to work, because we have 3 colleges in particular that are just, they want to get so into the details. I mean, they're arguing about wording in a letter specifying exactly what the legislation is going to say. And, you know, I'm not sure that that's really our job at this point in time. So I would say that with the 8, I just really want a group that is of the, I guess, the acceptance that this is what's happening, that we are amalgamating, and that, you know, we will trust the process to a certain degree. I don't have a background or specialty in the legislation writing. That's not my role. It's not my job. So, you know, I need to be able to work with those that do have that expertise to make this happen.
So it's not necessarily the message of what you're saying, it's who you're messaging it with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I see a couple hands up with questions. So I think we saw Dorina first, and then Samir, and then Steve. Go ahead, Dorina.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for bringing this news to us. I keep an eye open over this because whatever happens in BC will have a
likely happen. Yeah.
Us. And my question is in terms of logistics. So if I'm thinking of regulation, I'm thinking of committees that are actually actively working to their mandates. For example, if there is anything that the College of Opticians has to take care of, such as a complaint, the group that works in that committee is going to take care of complaints from College of Optometrists as well, or how is that working?
Yeah, that's a good question. The complaints piece is kind of being reworked as well. And we could spend probably a whole afternoon talking about that part of it. But a lot of it is going to be handed off to a more centralized body as the intake. And then this is where the profession-specific council pieces will come in, and there will still be committees. So it's kind of my understanding that, let's say with a complaint, so what we call an inquiry committee is where we start with the complaints process, that if they need profession-specific input, there will be a pool of people to draw from for that particular committee. So as a complaint comes in, it could be optometry, it could be opticians, and then a mixture of public members. But this is where some of our group is really hung up on. And yeah, we are just thinking about it differently, because I've always envisioned that the profession-specific councils would be like a pool for the board or the committees to pull from, that they would then set up to use for a particular complaint, or, you know, to review a particular standard of practice or something that was being done. And I guess another piece on this would be, and you weren't specifically saying this, Dorina, but it's always crossed my mind too, what will happen if we have a complaint that's being worked on when an amalgamation happens? Like how will that transition? And the nurses have told me that they just transitioned it into a brand new committee. But again, they had enough of a mixture of people from the various, you know, different nursing professions that were able to pick it up and continue that work. So I hope that sort of answers your question. It is one of those weird, it's one of the things that is really got people hung up at the moment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Over to Samir.
Thank you, Lisa. That was actually a great explanation, and definitely, Dorina, was a great question. Question, I have it, or what's your suggestion for our college, basically, in terms of preparing for amalgamation? Like, what's your take on it?
Well, I think that what you need to do is you need to think about what your values are. Like, what is the culture that you are wanting to take to a new organization? And then you need to align with other groups that fit that same culture. So I can see, as I said, within our 11, there there are 6 for sure's that are all thinking very similar, and then 2 others that seem to have kind of come around to, feeling the same as the rest of us. So I would suggest you really need to think about that. What's important to you? What would you want to see change if they're opening up the Health Professions Act and they're going to do this? Do you want to be with professions that have similar scope of practice, like optometry, or would you rather be with professions that don't have any overlap? Would you, does it make sense to be with groups that maybe, like we talked about this, maybe that make a device as part of their service to the public? So there's lots of different ways that you can, start working on positioning. And, but I would just find people that have a similar thought on the culture. And that's kind of an important piece.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Let's hear from two last questions with Steve, and then we'll hear from Amber.
Thanks, Sarah. Lisa, have you found any one particular group that has sort of pushed it out front that they want to be in charge because they've got the most money saved up or something like that in the organization? Or
no.
No,
I would say very definitely no. In fact, I think I can be fairly blunt in saying I would have told you at one point in time, I might have thought optometry would try and, at least with the smaller colleges, do that. They've shown no interest at all in kind of driving it. I would say there are a couple of people in particular who are really championing the, starting the work and continuing to build on everything that we've done, but they are not trying to take a leadership role as far as directing anybody else either. Very open group.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So let's give the last question to Amber.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good.
So just a quick question, and you might have already covered this, but I just wanted to clarify. So am I correct? You didn't have the choice of who you were being partnered with, correct?
No.
Okay. That was just, I guess, more of a clarification. So like when you're saying for us to consider, finding like-minded colleges that share the same values, I think that that's definitely important. It just seems kind of unfortunate that you guys aren't in that position to be able to really do that right now. But if you are finding that it's, you're not going to be able to come to some sort of agreement with those other colleges that you're kind of being pushed into right now, are you guys going to have the opportunity, do you think, to say, okay, look, we have, this group that wants to partner together and we will work well together? Do you think that that's something that you can see happening?
Yeah, I do. We've had enough discussions with with ministry staff that have given us the indication that, this is the proposal, but they can see other possibilities coming out of it, depending what's happening. And they're quite aware that there is a group of us that are working well together, and then a small group that are making things quite challenging. So, yeah, if I could honestly just say, yep, this group, we're good. But I think we need to go through this next exercise. I really do think that working on the business case basically will really help identify where we're going to struggle. So I'm hopeful that then we can go back to ministry and say, look, this group is willing to go. We know how much money it's going to take. We're willing to start right now. And maybe they will. Maybe they'll just let us start, and who knows, they may even just direct the rest of them that they have to be part of it too. That could happen, which, and they don't have a say, which might.
Good luck.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. And we really, thank you for your valuable insights. I think that was a great presentation. And we'll thank you and let you get on. We know you have an important afternoon meeting. So thanks for taking the time out.
Sounds good. And I'll keep you posted on what's happening.
That sounds good.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
So with that, I'll pass it over to Fazal to take us through the registrar's report.
Okay, I'm going to try to pick up some steam here. So everybody has the registrar's report in their package. So I'll just quickly hit a couple of highlights. The renewal season was came off with without any real hitches, and I'm pleased to say that we actually had a better renewal rate than we did last year. I think a lot of this was supported by the fee reduction that we had implemented. So I think that is working well. We had about 95, 96% of our registrants renew. And then in the report, those who didn't renew and gave a reason for the breakdown is there. Registration exams, thankfully we had usually we have 2 sessions in a year, 2 large sessions. Unfortunately, we only had 1, but I was pleased that we did get the one off the ground considering the pandemic. And then we, in early January, had our first French session, a small session, but it was our first time delivering the exam in French at one of the new schools in the system, La Cité College. Remote working, I think everybody's aware, everything is going well and is nothing is being impeded timelines or workflow wise. Government relations wise, we have an organization that we are working with who is monitoring things like regulation updates and monitoring the landscape for governance and regulatory model changes. So they're keeping an eye on that for us. They've also been very, very responsive and getting us guidance whenever there's a new announcement that's being made by the government, the provincial government surrounding pandemic restrictions and things. So we've got an extra ear to the ground there. Collaboration-wise, we're continuing to heavily participate with HPRO, which is the sort of the group of regulators in Ontario. So definitely being part of that group has helped us a lot with the college performance measurements framework. The other thing I'll just mention, which is sort of new, is just very, very recently there was an announcement made that the College of Optometrists has got a new registrar, permanent registrar in place. And it was nice to have, his name is Joe Jameson. He's from the College of Teachers. So he's had a long history there, I think about 18 years as deputy registrar. So he's joined the College of Optometrists as their new registrar. And I did actually hear from him. He reached out to me last night, so that was kind of nice. And we'll be getting together and connecting in the next couple of days. We also had a quick update. Well, actually, a fairly good conversation with Alison Henry at the end of January. And we updated her on where we were with the delegation standard of practice and how refraction fit into that. So everything seems to be good there. She did give me assurances that the ministry is actively looking at the regulations that are sitting with them. So we do have a commitment that they're going to try to move them as quickly as possible. Seneca Program Advisory Committee meeting. We, myself and Amy attended the Seneca PAC meeting. Definitely, they're giving us the heads up that their graduation rates are a lot lower right now. Their cohorts are a lot smaller and backed up. So this is something we'll need to keep in mind as it'll impact the flow of students challenging or writing the registration exam and then conversely becoming opticians. So there's going to be a little bit of I would say, a bottlenecking for a little short while. And then as schools get back to capacity, we'll see it pick up, hopefully. And then just a heads up that we are working to bring you very shortly some fees, registration fees information. Currently, the table runs till the end of 2021. And we need a new updated table for 2022 to 2026's registration dues. We were looking actively at trying to freeze rates or lower rates, looking at all of those things. I think we have to look at all these things in light of the recent pandemic and also the fact that we've had to dip into our reserve fees, reserve funds to give the fee reduction. So we're going to bring you all of that very soon. We'll run it through the Finance Committee and bring it to the board in May. And we are also looking at, probably at the governance committee level, ways of seeing what we can do to address the issue of board materials being made available earlier. So that's being looked at actively by the governance committee. So that is the registrar's report, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Great, thanks, Fazal. And I see we have one question from Murray, and then I know we do have a speaker waiting in the waiting room with a couple more items. So then I'll maybe suggest that unless we've got burning questions, we'll try to hit the next couple of items a little bit quickly. So we'll go ahead to Murray.
Well, I'll ask this question very, very quickly. It's more a comment on your last section on placing the information in the virtual boardroom more than a week in advance. I want to be cognizant of the stress that this puts on staff, and I would, for what it's worth, 1 week is sufficient for me.
Thank you, Murray.
Thanks, Murray. Okay, so if there's no other comments or questions, I'll move to Brian Todd, our chair, to take us through the committee reports and exam reports.
Thanks, Sarah. So this is 13.2, exam reports, committee reports, and annual reports. Again, we usually do this in an omnibus fashion to try and expedite time. There is going to be a chance for questions, though. But of course, embedded in these particular reports this time is the annual general report, which highlights what the board has voted and agreed upon in the past year. So I turn it back to you, Sarah. So if there are any questions to go on to these reports, please ask them.
Any questions at all for Brian or the group?
Is this all the reports in their entirety?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any questions, Brian. So I think given that, we can likely move forward with a motion.
Thanks very much, Sarah. So the motion will read to approve the committee reports, communication reports, and exam reports as presented.
So moved.
Henry, have a seconder?
Netta?
Netta, thank you, Netta. All in favor? Hands up. Passed unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, super.
Brian, can I ask a quick question?
No.
Okay.
Yes, Henry, go ahead.
No, it's Murray.
Oh, Murray, sorry.
Yeah. On the discipline committee, it says that the results of these decisions were on the website or on the boardroom. I couldn't find them in the boardroom.
Amy, did you want to address that?
Sorry, I'll have to see exactly how it's worded. They're on the website, they're not in the boardroom. That's correct.
I'm reading the website now. So where would it be on the website?
So there's a page in the public section under discipline. It says discipline decisions.
Okay.
And then when you get to that page, you have to expand them by year.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Carolyn now to take us through the communications report. Carolyn, I think we have you on mute. There you go.
Hi, sorry. Sorry, I'm just going to share my screen here. Just give me a second. Okay, so the communications report. As usual, we've been directing our efforts to keeping our registrants updated. This has included 7 COVID-19 updates by eBlast, our December board meeting highlights eBlast, as well as regular updates on social media. I thought it would be interesting to share with you some of our most frequently visited web pages. So this just shows for 2020, the visits to our homepage, the visits to our COVID-19 page, visits to our public register, as well as this is our registrants landing page and our jurisprudence. I thought that you would be interested to see where our traffic is going when it gets to our website. I also wanted to share with you the traffic that's going to our blog. So this is an initiative that we started in 2020. So this reflects the 2020 year. I'm hoping that as our blog as people become more aware of our blog and that we are posting regularly, if our content is timely and relevant, that people will continue to return here and read what we're posting, which, as you can see, has already started happening. The other thing I wanted to share with you is visits to our news page. So in addition to our blog, we're also regularly posting on our homepage updates. So these are slightly different than our blog. This would be if we send out information to our registrants by eBlast or other things that might be of interest or important for them to know. So again, this is just for 2020 and we're posting this on our homepage. So as you can see, we are getting some traffic to this page, which is great. And then I just wanted to share with you our followers on social media. So as Fazal mentioned this morning, we have been, I guess, lucky in a sense that we've seen so much growth in our followers on social media over the last year. And I do think, as he noted, that this has been in part to the regularity with which we're posting, but also the fact that people are interested in what we're posting that's related to COVID-19. So I'm just going to take you through some of our posts since our October board meeting that that have got more attention than, let's say, other things. So to start with, we posted this on February 5th, and this is about one of the new COVID-19 variants. We don't seem to get tons of response from our followers on Twitter. We also don't have very many followers on Twitter, but this was popular on Facebook and on Instagram. This was posted on January 12th, and this was just to let registrants know that we were going to be sharing some more information with them by eBlast later that day. But again, lots of activity on Facebook and lots of activity on Instagram. Okay, so this post is a little bit more public facing. We tend to have a lot to say to our registrants, but we don't tend to focus as much on the public, and that's one thing that we're really trying to change. This got a lot of attention on Facebook and on Instagram, so we were pleased with that. This also posted in November about our exams. Actually did get a lot of attention on Twitter as well as on Facebook and on Instagram, which is interesting to note. And then just to end off, this post was about World Sight Day. It's nice to see that this got so much attention. And again, this is a little bit more public facing. As I was mentioning, we're really trying to send our posts in that direction in addition to the information that we're sharing with our registrants. So I will end there.
Okay, are there any questions for Carolyn before we close out? Don't see anything. Okay, so thanks so much, Carolyn. Okay, so with that, I'll pass it back to Brian.
Thank you, Sarah. So this is going to end the public session of this particular board meeting today. I will be therefore then seeking a motion to proceed to an in-camera session under section 7(2)D of the code. I would like to thank all the attendees that were here today, Jay, I think especially, for a great presentation. And I think that...
Thank you, Todd.
So we will now go into a camera, and I will ask for a motion to do so. I will call for a motion to allow Karen Friday Field to participate in the in-camera session. I'd like to... Neda moves it, and who seconds it?
Omar.
Omar seconds it. All in favor, hands up. Passed. Thank you very much. We are now in camera.
Okay, so we're just going to end live stream. Perfect.
Sorry.
Okay, and then process-wise, we're in camera.